Okay, we've been talking about Abram, and last week we heard about how Abram had given Lot the choice of any of the land that he could see because there was too many of their flocks all trying to eat from the same area, and their workers were fighting and it wasn't working out. And so Abram told Lot, listen, let's separate. You take your pick. Where would you like to live? So Lot picked the green grass and the river and the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah to live near. And so he went off to live there. And God spoke to Abram and again reminded him of his promise to give him all the land that he could see around that area. Also, that he would have as many descendants, so many descendants, that he wouldn't be able to count them, just like you can't count the stars. He brought him out at nighttime and told him to look at the sky and said, try to count the stars. And he couldn't, there was too many. And God told Abram, that's how many descendants you will have, so many that you can't count. But Abram still didn't have a son. And his wife was getting old, and it was getting to a point in their lives where it would be impossible for them to be able to have children. But God had given his promise and Abram believed it. Well, Sarai, his wife, was thinking, how is this going to happen? And she was looking around and she saw her maid Hagar, who was from Egypt. And so Sarai, she came up with a plan. She thought, well, maybe, I don't see how this is going to work the way God said. Maybe I'm not going to be the one who has the child for Abram. Maybe he needs another wife. And at that time, men in that area did have multiple wives. And so Sarai came to Abram one day and came up with this plan. She said, listen, how about I give you my maid to be your next wife, and then she can have a child. Maybe that's what God meant, that you would have many descendants. So Abram went along with this plan of Sarai's, and Hagar, the maid, really did have a child. They named him Ishmael. And Abram was about 85 years old when this happened. Well, God appeared to Abram again, and he said, Abram, I'm going to change your name to Abraham because you are going to be the father of many nations. The name Abraham means father of many nations. And he said, I also want to change your wife's name, Sarai, to Sarah. This means princess, and she will be the mother of nations. God was telling them that Ishmael was not going to be the one that became the father of many nations. That Sarah herself, his real wife, his first wife, was going to be the one that had a child that would be the father of many nations. At this point, Abraham was 100 years old, and his wife Sarah was 90 years old. This was very old for having children, even back then when they lived a lot longer. And Abraham actually laughed when he thought about his wife having a baby at her age. And he said to God, oh, that Ishmael would live before you. He said, listen, I've already got a son. Too bad that you wouldn't accept him. And God said, no, your wife will have a son, and you will name him Isaac, and he will be the one that I pass the covenant on to. I will make an everlasting covenant with him and his children, just like I made with you, Abraham. Sometimes people think that they need to help God along in things, but God does not need any help. He can do whatever he wants to do. Well, time went on, and one day Abraham was sitting in the shade of his tent on a hot day when he looked up and he saw 3 travelers, And he must have known there was something special about them, because he ran out and he bowed to them. He said, here, come rest in the shade under the tree, and you can wash your feet. I'll bring you some water to wash your feet because it was dusty and dirty and hot, and I'll go get you some food. So Abraham ran off to see his wife in the tent and get her to start baking some cakes, like bread cakes, and he ran off to the field to pick out a calf, and they started to prepare the calf to have some meat, and he collected milk and he collected butter, and he brought all this to the 3 men for them to eat. Now these 3 men were not just men. They looked like men, but they were actually from heaven. There was 2 angels, and most likely the 3rd one was actually Jesus before he came to earth as a baby and grew to be a man later. So this was before that. These 3 men were there to visit Abraham and talk to him. And one of the men said to Abraham, "Oh, where is your wife Sarah?" So he was letting them know that he already knew who she was. He said her name, and Abraham said, "Oh, she's in the tent." And Sarah was actually just on the other side of the tent door, so she could hear what was going on. She was curious. And the man said, "Next year, your wife Sarah will have a son." And this time Sarah laughed. She thought, "I'm too old to have a son." And the man said, "Why did Sarah laugh?" And Sarah came out and said, "I didn't laugh." And he said, "Yes, you did. God knows everything, remember?" He said, "Yes, you did." He said, "Is anything too hard for God? This will actually happen. You don't need to laugh or think it's silly. It actually will happen." So he told this to Sarah. And then the 3 men finished up what they were eating, and they were going to go on their way. And Abraham went to walk with them. And one of the men stopped to talk to Abraham while the other 2 went ahead. And the man said, "Can I hide from my friend the thing I'm going to do? I'm going to tell you why I'm here and what's going on." He said, "I've heard about the sin of those 2 cities down there, Sodom and Gomorrah. They are so wicked. I have heard about it, and we came down to see in person if it is really as bad as we heard. That's why we're here. And if it is that wicked, then those cities will be destroyed." Well, Abraham was worried. Lot lived in those cities. Lot and his family had moved down, and they had actually moved into this city. They weren't just on the outskirts. And he was worried about them. And he said, "Oh, well, you wouldn't destroy this city if you found, let's say, 50 righteous people in them, would you?" And the man, who was God, said, "No, I wouldn't destroy the cities if I found 50 righteous people." So they continued walking, and Abraham said, "Well, you wouldn't destroy it if there was just like 5 less. If you just didn't quite make it to 50, there was 5 missing from the 50, would you destroy it then?" And God said, "No, I wouldn't destroy it then." And they kept walking, and Abraham said, "Please don't be angry with me, but what if you found 30 righteous people in those cities? Would you destroy it then?" And God said, "No, I wouldn't destroy the cities if there was 30 righteous people there." And time went on, and Abraham said, "Please don't be angry, but what if there was 20? And God said, "No, I wouldn't destroy it for 20. Now, Abraham knew that Lot's family consisted of about 8 people. And so finally Abraham said, "Would you destroy the cities if you found, let's say, 10 good people, 10 righteous people in those cities?" And God said, "No, I wouldn't destroy them if I found 10 righteous people there." So what happened? The angels that looked like men went down to the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah. And Lot was an important man. Important men in those days, they would sit at the gate of the city, and people would come to them for advice and for them to judge between them. And so Lot was sitting at the gate and he saw these two men coming, and he must have known they were special right away because he jumped up. It was getting towards evening, and he said, listen, come to my house. I will give you food and you can spend the night, and then you can go continue your journey wherever it is you're going. You can go tomorrow morning. You can spend the night at my house. Now, what Lot knew was that the city that he lived in was extremely dangerous, and that these men would be in danger of being hurt or even killed if they did not come to his house that night. And the men were like, oh no, that's all right. Don't worry about it. We'll just sleep out here, outside. It'll be okay. And Lot said, no, you can't sleep outside. You must come to my house. Come to my house. So he pressured them to come to his house, and because he knew how dangerous it was. Well, when those men came to his house, he was feeding them. He made a big feast for them at his house, and all of a sudden they heard knocks, pounding knocks at the door. Well, what was it? The Bible says that all the men of the city, young and old alike, everyone, all the men of the city had come to Lot's house, and they were pounding on the door, and they were yelling and saying, we know you have 2 visitors in there. We want you to bring them out. We want to hurt them. And Lot said, no, you can't do that. They're my guests. You can't hurt these men. And they said, yes, bring them out or we'll break your door down. So Lot went out to talk to the men of the city, and he said, don't do so wickedly. Don't do this. And the men of the city were so angry with Lot. They said, who are you? You weren't even born here. You just came here a little while ago to live, and now you're going to tell us what to do? You better watch out, or we will kill you too. We'll kill you first, and then we'll get them. Well, they were reaching for Lot, but before they could hurt him, the men that were in his house opened the door and stuck out their arms and grabbed him and pulled him into the house to keep him safe. And the next thing they did was they struck all the men outside the door with blindness. So all those men that had wanted to get into Lot's house to hurt them, they were blind. And the Bible said that they didn't just go, oh no, what happened to me? I can't see anything, and go home. Instead, even though they were blind, they were still trying to get in the house, and they were wearying themselves. They were getting tired trying to find their way in the door. Well, they did stay the night, and the angels that looked like men, they said to Lot, they said, listen, this city is going to be destroyed. They did not find 10 righteous people in that city. They said the city is going to be destroyed. You need to send messages to anyone you love, anyone in your family, that they need to get out of the city if they want to be safe. And so Lot had 2 daughters that were married. Well, at least 2, I think. Yeah, I think 2 daughters were married. He had 2 sons-in-law, so he sent messages to their house. Maybe he himself went to the house to tell them, listen, you got to get out of here. The city's going to be destroyed. But his sons-in-law just looked at him and laughed. They thought he was just being stupid. Like, oh, you're dreaming. And so they wouldn't listen to him, and Lot had to go running back home again. And the next morning, before the sun was even rising, the 2 angels woke up, or got Lot and his wife and his 2 daughters, and they said, listen, now you need to get out of your house. You need to get out of the city. The city is going to be destroyed. You need to run. And they were taking their time. Maybe they were gathering a suitcase. We don't really know, but they were taking too long. And so the 2 angels literally grabbed them by the hand and dragged them out of the house and out of the city. And they said, run for your lives. Run as far and as fast as you can. See those mountains over there? You run to those mountains so that you can be safe. Run fast, run now. There's no time to lose. And don't look back. Well, they started to run, but Lot's wife looked back. Maybe she was like, oh, I've always lived there. I don't want to leave. I miss my house. I just got new cushions on the couch. I don't know what she was thinking, but she turned around, she disobeyed those angels, and she looked back, and she was turned to a pillar of salt. And Lot and her 2 daughters had to leave her there and keep running because Sodom and Gomorrah were destroyed. God sent fire and brimstone out of heaven to fall on Sodom and Gomorrah, and those 2 wicked, wicked cities were burnt up and destroyed. The Bible says that when Abraham woke up that morning, he went to the top of the hill, he left his tent, and he went and looked at Sodom and Gomorrah. Did God find 10 righteous people? Were they saved? But when he looked early in the morning, all he saw was black. The valley was filled with smoke and ashes. The cities had been destroyed. And so, poor Lot, he chose what he thought was best, but it was not good. He moved into a city that he knew was full of wickedness. And his daughters married men in that city, and he was one of the rulers in that city. But he did not choose well, and the cities had to be destroyed. God couldn't even find 10 righteous people there to save the cities. So that was how it all worked out, what happened when Lot made his choice and tried to get the best for himself. And we will find out more about Abraham and Sarah and the promise God made to them next week.